Well, they found Hunter Biden, everybody. Where's Hunter? Remember Where's Waldo? That book when you were a kid, you try to find Waldo with all the people around him. Well, we were playing Where's Hunter. Turns out they were able to get him. You have the Democrat debate happening tonight. And it seemed that the Biden handlers and assorted media strategists and all the other folks who were involved in trying to prop up the Biden situation here, make it look like it's not as bad as we all know it is. They figured, okay, well, let's get ahead of this thing because Biden's going to have to get even the pro-Biden journos know that he's going to have to get some kind of question about this tonight. So better to get ahead of it and to have Hunter Biden establish that, there was nothing going on here, nothing wrong here, everything is just fine. At least that's supposed to be the storyline. That's what we're supposed to take. And I want to play this for you because there are problems, even with Hunter's very favorable, helpful to him interview, with the way they ask him the most basic questions. He knows they're not going to come at him with anything particularly. They'll ask questions like, do you think it was a good idea? They won't say, how can you tell us that it wasn't corruption? I mean, it's all about how they frame the questions and pose the questions. But here is Hunter Biden when asked on, I think it's ABC, right? ABC, CBS, NBC. It's all the same thing. I mean, they think it's not, but I think it is. Here's what Hunter Biden says when asked about whether he talked to his dad about the stuff. Oh, please. Let's know this. Let's find out what he said. Play 16.
I want to get to the heart of it. Did you and your father ever discuss Ukraine?
No. As I said, the only time was after a news account, and it wasn't a discussion in any way. There's no but to this. No, we never did.
Your dad said, I hope you know what you're doing.
I hope you know what you're doing.
I do?
And I said, I do. And that was literally the end of our discussion.
Why?
Because my dad was vice president of the United States. There's literally nothing as a young man or as a full-grown adult that my father in some way hasn't had influence over. It does not serve either one of us.
When he said, I hope you know what you're doing, what did he think you were doing?
Well, he read the press reports that I joined the board of Burisma, which was a Ukrainian natural gas company. And there's been a lot of misinformation about me, not about my dad. Nobody buys that, but it buys this idea that I was unqualified to be on the board.
What were your qualifications to be on the board of Burisma?
Well, I was vice chairman of the board of Amtrak for 5 years. I was the chairman of the board of the UN World Food Program. I was a lawyer for Boies Schiller Flexner, one of the most prestigious law firms in the world.
You didn't have any extensive knowledge about natural gas or Ukraine itself, though.
No, but I think that I had as much knowledge as anybody else that was on the board, if not more.
In the list that you gave me of the reasons why you're on that board, you did not list the fact that you were the son of the vice president.
Of course, yeah. No,
what role do you think that played?
I think that it is impossible for me to be on any of the boards that I just mentioned without saying that I'm the son of the Vice President of the United States.
You were paid $50,000 a month for your position?
Look, I'm a private citizen. One thing that I don't have to do is sit here and open my kimono as it relates to how much money I make or did or didn't. But it's all been reported.
I gotta tell you, this was great. Fantastic. After all of the whining from libs about Trump and the emoluments clause, we have been led to believe through story after story in the Washington Post, the New York Times. I mean, nobody even knew what the heck the emoluments clause was until they thought maybe they could get Trump on it, right? That if foreigners are buying cheeseburgers and beer at Trump Hotel in D.C., that's constitutionally prohibited because they're basically buying off the President of the United States. And I would just say to all the Washington Post journos who were running with this absurd theory, well, it's constitutionally not allowed to get payments from a foreign government. Yeah, they're not allowed to give you a big bag of money. They're allowed to be customers at a business that has expenses and payroll and that has countless other customers too. What leverage could you possibly have there? Walk into the White House sometime, try this one, say, I have no foreign policy experience, but I did buy a cheeseburger at Trump Hotel last night, and so I would like you to end this trade war with China. See how that goes with you. See how that does. But this is what they were saying. I'm not making it up. This is what they were telling people. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. And yet now, when you have Hunter Biden doing this interview, this is just the picture. The left always talks about privilege. There is no privilege like bratty politician child privilege. And this is bipartisan. It's true on all sides and both sides. I'm sorry. Bratty politician child is a level of privilege. You get to go to any college you want, if you're young enough for that. You know, you get to be famous and people will pay you to speak. Why would anyone pay Chelsea Clinton to speak anywhere? Who cares what soon-to-be congressional candidate, I can assure you, Chelsea Clinton, and then after that senator, and then after that presidential candidate, they're going to revive the whole Clinton dynasty around her. Who cares what she has to say about anything? How has she proven that her thoughts are worthwhile? Who cares what any politician's children have to say about anything? Well, if they're particularly compelling, if they're legitimately interesting, good on their feet, good on certain topics, I'm persuadable. But that's a case-by-case basis. Hunter Biden, however, is sitting there and he's basically looking the American people in the eye and he's like, yeah, you know, I mean, like, I was as qualified as anybody else to be on board of that company. Yeah, totally. Asked if he was qualified. He said he was on the board of Amtrak. Oh, you mean Amtrak, the company that Joe Biden is linked to as a politician, as part of his brand. Joe Biden takes the Amtrak from Delaware to D.C., you know, he's blue-collar Joe. That's the whole story. Oh, you mean that Amtrak thought it might be a good idea? I mean, a company that is dependent upon the federal government for its largesse. Yeah, they're going to put the single U.S. senator who probably rides that more than anyone else, rides that train more than anyone else, put his son on the board because Hunter Biden's so smart. I mean, come on, man. His qualifications for this clearly nepotistic post are the other posts of nepotism granted to him because of who his dad is. This is what he's telling you in the interview. Oh, my gosh. UN food program. Oh, he's on the board of the UN food program. I'm sure that was really strenuous work. And he was hired by a big D.C. law firm. Well, that had nothing to do with his last name. My friends, this is the embarrassment that the Democrats can pretend like it's not embarrassing. But when you look at the complaints, I mean, the hypocrisy is what's just so difficult to stomach here. You look at the way that they have talked about, whined about all things related to Trump, everything that Trump and his family have ever done, in office, out of office. They believe that the trademarks that his children are getting approved around the world, that's illicit, that's wrong. The emoluments clause, Trump hotels, the businesses, they're always worried about whether somebody in the United States government is paying to stay in a Trump hotel. I mean, they're completely fixated on this stuff. Never come up with anything. But, under the Obama administration, the vice president's son was getting paid off by a foreign government. And we're supposed to believe that didn't at least create the appearance. You could say, well, there was never an explicit agreement between between Hunter Biden and his dad that, Burisma wouldn't get investigated or, yeah, okay, but that's not how bribes necessarily work either, folks. If a police officer is, pulls me over, and I don't know why he's pulled me over, and I were to just say, well, hello, officer, and I slid a crisp, I was going to say 20, but then I'd really be in trouble. A crisp $100 bill across the top of the door as I have, put the window down. The officer's not going to say, oh, that's cool. We didn't agree that I'm just going to let you off because you're giving me money. So I'm just going to take the money and then make my determination, but it has nothing to do with you giving me money. That's not going to happen. Paying off the vice president's son isn't about an explicit agreement. It's about the vice president's son's getting a lot of money. Does that mean that maybe you're less likely to be okay as Joe Biden, point man on Ukraine policy, with an investigation of that company that results in people going to prison or bad things happening? Are there concerns then about dirtying things up, muddying up the waters, such that the Obama administration and anybody who worked for it, any any diplomat, any politician who was involved in Obama's foreign policy decision-making, that administration's decision-making in Ukraine, they would have to know the vice president's son is on the board of that company. There's no way they didn't know that. And this would have been talked about in those circles working on Ukraine policy. That doesn't affect decision-making. That doesn't matter to what they're trying to accomplish here. I've got to tell you, it seems to me that it would matter a whole heck of a lot, depending on the circumstances, even absent an explicit agreement that there would do. And think about how stupid that would be. Do we really have to pretend that anyone thinks Hunter Biden might have sent an email to his dad like, hey, I know that we shouldn't be talking about this, but you got a big check, or I got a big check rather from this company, so let's back off them. Of course, not even Hunter Biden is that reckless, so you're never going to find that. But what we have here is the admission that this was gross, and that's why he stepped down from the board. It's a 5-year term. Wow, what a gig, by the way. Can somebody put me on the board of a Ukrainian natural gas company at $50K a month? Sign me up. Ethics or no ethics, man. $50K a month for 5 years? That's really to do nothing, to be on the board, to be a figurehead. This is the best no-show job I've ever heard of. Well, one of them. And now he's stepping down but he didn't do anything wrong, you see. It's just I love this. He said this in the interview too. It has created a distraction. Oh, a distraction. That's a very nice way of saying it's created a massive cluster of a problem for Hunter Biden, for his dad, and so they know he's got to back away from this. The gravy train has come to a stop, Hunter Biden. But you got to love the chutzpah here. The willingness to look people in the eye and say, yeah, I was qualified for that board. I don't know anything about Ukraine or natural gas, but put me on the board of that company. Why should I be on the board of that company? Because, my dad's this famous politician. I'm on the board of a lot of companies because of who my dad is. So, we just wanted to add this one into the mix. It strikes me as a very shaky justification. That much is for sure. Will this change anything going into the debate? No, of course not. They're going to pretend that Biden has answered all these questions. And but he was asked specifically. We got one more here. He was asked about his relationship with his dad. And here's also this Hunter Biden interview moment. Play 14.
So you think it's perfectly fine? I mean, the Trump children have been criticized for doing similar sorts of business.
I don't look. Unlike them, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about them. I really don't. It's all noise. And what they do is they create just an enormous amount of noise. I have to then answer questions about accusations made by probably the most unethical group of people that we've ever seen in this republic.
You said no one votes or will vote for or against my dad because of me.
Yeah.
And my dad knows that. Do you still believe that?
100%. They know who my dad is. My dad doesn't have to defend me. My dad only has to love me. And my dad loves me unequivocally. Look, I know that after being able to get up after Bo died, say whatever the hell they want to say about me.
Lock him up.
Good for them. I mean, who cares? Look, like I've said, I've been through some stuff in my life. I've been through some real stuff. This isn't real stuff. It isn't. It truly isn't. That part of it, that Barnum and Bailey, say anything, do anything you want. Donald Prince Humperdinck Trump Jr. is not somebody that I really care about.
I don't even know what that last thing was. Whatever. But he's clearly trying to tell everybody how this doesn't matter. He's doing a national TV interview on the subject the night of the Democrat debates because it doesn't matter, right? Because it doesn't matter at all. I would just have you also keep in mind here that while he can invoke the Biden family has had tragedies, many families have had tragedies, however. So I don't think that that's a shield for illicit or unethical behavior. It wouldn't be for other people. But keep in mind, when he's saying that, oh, this doesn't really matter, and this is all a nothing burger, which I agree with those who say that a nothing burger as a phrase is something we should probably phase out of the English language. Who came up with this? What is it? There's no such thing as a nothing burger. But remember that his dad, as vice president of administration, oversaw the spying on American citizens. Right. That was on Obama and the vice president's watch. Spying on American citizens using FISA warrant. People like Carter Page, people like George Papadopoulos. What did they do to deserve all that? What did General Flynn do to deserve to have his career destroyed, ruined, threatened with being sent to prison, threatened with bankruptcy? Did he deserve that? This whole, we're above this is nothing. Really? Because the vice president was part of the Donald Trump is a traitor, Donald Trump colluded with the Russians, lying chorus for a long time. The vice president, his dad, fights very dirty when he thinks it's in his interests. Will really do harm to people and their reputations the moment that he thinks it is the way that he needs to go. And so, really, now we're going to pretend we're above that, Hunter Biden? I don't think so. We're going to pretend that the effort to run a Ukraine Gate version of Russia Gate as a soft coup attempt against his president, I'm sorry, it's just unacceptable. And they're not above it. They're not above any of it. Just want to tell everybody that today is our first day of The First, new channel on Pluto TV. You can download the Pluto TV app if you want to see what's going on here in the Freedom Hut. You want to see producer Mark making funny faces at me. All kinds of good stuff going on here in NYC as we do the show for you. Just download the Pluto TV app on channel 248, The First. It's all about free speech. It's all about sharing ideas without fear of corporate censorship, right? The Chinese aren't telling me what to say. Nobody's telling me what to say. Check out The First, channel 248 on Pluto TV. The Pluto TV app is totally free. Download it on your smartphone. There's no subscription, nothing. So please, just great content. My friend Jesse Kelly is in the lineup. We're going to be adding more people as we go forward. We're going to have fantastic people all day long on the Pluto TV app, channel 248. The channel is The First. And if you're looking for great conservative commentary, this is the spot to do it. Also, by the way, the podcast, The Buck Sexton Show, is up every day at 3 Eastern. So if you want the audio, you know where to get it. Wherever you get podcasts, iTunes, iHeart app, every day, 3 Eastern.
You are now entering the Freedom Hut Tactical Operations Center. All sensitive programs must be kept strictly need to know.
Clear. Team Buck is cleared. Roger that. And ready for the Buck Brief.
This video right here appearing to show Turkey's military bombing Kurd civilians in a Syrian border town. The Kurds, who fought alongside the U.S. against ISIS. Now, horrific reports of atrocities committed by Turkish-backed fighters on those very allies.
Turns out that ABC News, which is one of the biggest news operations in the country, aired footage of what they claimed was a frontline battle explosion between Syrian Kurds and the invading Turkish military. Unfortunately, it was really from a nighttime machine gun demonstration at the Knob Creek gun range in West Point, Kentucky. So, I mean, we all make geographic errors. But as those of you listening to this show no doubt are already aware, Knob Creek gun range in West Point, Kentucky is quite a ways away from the front lines of the Turkish-Syrian fighting in northern Syria, or Kurdish fighting in northern Syria. That's an issue. That's a problem. How could this happen, you would say? Well, they're of course, at ABC, there's no dispute that this was a mess up. But then the issue becomes, how could they make such a a bizarre mistake. And this is going to tie in a second to the way the media is covering everything going on in Syria right now. It's because anything that looks like it's mayhem and disaster and terrible right now is going to be put on the air, is going to be shared with the American public because it is viewed as damaging for Trump. Any bodies, any mayhem, anything bad that is happening in Syria right now, the media has set this up so that it is, Trump has greenlit the invasion of Syria by the Turkish forces, and it's a disaster. Everyone knows it's a disaster. Also terrible. I'm here to tell you, it's not the disaster they're saying it is. And I think in the end, we'll see that Trump was right in terms of strategy. And I know that there's a very few conservatives even agree with me on this. I think Trump is right. And I will tell you why. But first, I would just note that here we have a circumstance where you have fake news effectively happening. Now, they'll say it's an accident, fine. But once again, it's a major error of fact that happens to occur in a way that, if it were true, it would have been useful for the Trump is terrible narrative that the media is obsessed with, right? You hear huge explosion, all this terrible stuff happening in the Kurdish, Turkish fighting in northern Syria right now. It turns out it didn't really happen. I would just note the following for you, that the Syrian civil war, which is what is still going on here, this is a civil war in a country with multiple factions inside the country, really dozens of factions inside the country vying for power and control. It is a place that involves foreign governments taking sides in what then has become a proxy battle on Syrian soil. The Turks, the Russians, the Iranians, you can't even name all the different foreign actors that are. I mean, the Israelis occasionally show up and blow something up. I mean, a lot of people are very involved in what is going on here. And you also have a Sunni-Shia schism that is the backdrop of this. Remember, the Alawite minority in Syria that the Assad regime is a part of is Shia. The majority of the anti-Assad fighters are Sunni Arab, and including many Sunni Arab jihadists and groups that are either directly or indirectly affiliated with the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. So that's what's happening in this country. The Obama administration was leading on the Syria question for the international community over the course of, I think it was, let's say 7 years, six or 7 years, depending on how you calculate it. But for almost the entirety of Obama's presidency, certainly all of his second term, Syria has been a disaster. You had 500,000 people, and it's just an estimate, killed in the Syrian civil war. And you have seen more outrage and dismay from the American journo establishment in the last 72 hours than you saw in the 7 years before it, where Obama was the guy calling the shots in Syria. Notice how little coverage you saw, I would note, of the fall of Raqqa, the destruction of the Islamic State, things that happened while Trump was in office. The eradication of ISIS, or the near eradication of ISIS. That, yeah, there were news reports on it, but it was never, you never had anyone from the national security establishment going on TV and saying, see, Trump does know something about this. Trump did have some idea of how to make this all stop. But now that there's a problem, now that there's an issue, everyone is viewing this as clear evidence that the president has no idea what's going on. He's reckless. He's destroying everything. And that's also just not true. The vice president spoke out on this in a number of fronts. Vice President Pence. And, for example, here's what he had to say about the U.S. position vis-a-vis. As I've been telling you, the Turks are the ones causing the problem here with our Kurdish allies. The Turks are the ones who are saying we're going after them. And they don't have to do that. They could not do that. So why our administration, why the Trump administration is being blamed for this is a question that I don't see nearly enough people attempting to answer. But here's what here's what the vice president says about the conversation with Turkey. Play 11, please.
President Erdogan reached out and requested the call. President Trump communicated to him very clearly that the United States of America wants Turkey to stop the invasion, to implement an immediate ceasefire, and to begin to negotiate with Kurdish forces in Syria to bring an end to the violence.
They're saying cut it out. They're saying that what the Turks are doing is opposed by this White House, opposed by the Trump administration. And Turkey is showing us, as I have been saying, they're not really an ally. They certainly shouldn't be in NATO, but they're not really an ally. The Turks do not do what is helpful to our interests in cases where, yes, they have their own interests. I understand that. But they don't need to be going after the Kurds like this right now. They don't have to be doing it. There's not some imminent danger to Turkey from the Kurds, but they are highly sensitive to this issue. And you know, this gets back into decades and decades of fighting, and so they don't want to listen to us. There are sanctions now against Turkey, so we are taking economic action against the Turks, against what is at least still officially a NATO ally. Here's what the vice president said. Play 12, please.
The sanctions that were announced today will continue and will worsen unless and until Turkey embraces an immediate ceasefire, stops the violence, and agrees to negotiate a long-term settlement of the issues along the border between Turkey and Syria.
Saying you better negotiate a ceasefire or else there's going to be economic pain for the Turks. So, good. This is the right move for the administration, and this is something that everybody needs to understand is being handled in a way that I think is responsible for this White House right now, given the realities on the ground. But I want to step back just from because the storyline is that we basically told the Turks to invade. That's not true. We didn't tell the Turks to invade. We knew the Turks were planning on probably doing this. We've been asking them not to. But Trump wanted to move U.S. troops out of the way because he doesn't want to he doesn't want them to. At some point, they'd be in the middle of this. People who think that 50 U.S. soldiers, we already had the Turks fire, they say accidentally, in the vicinity of our soldiers. At some point, U.S. troops are not enough to deter these factions from going after each other. And then we start getting involved. We start getting deeper. The national security establishment in this country does not want to learn the lesson of the last 20 years, which is that we do not want to be in Muslim-majority countries in the Middle East or South Asia that do not want a U.S. military presence there, that are in the midst of fighting, that have major problems with terrorism. We don't want to be in charge of rebuilding their societies. We don't want to be in charge of placating their various factions within the population. We're done. We don't want to do it anymore. And that's why I just note with some agitation, there's the way they're reporting on this is to just all make it about how much these other factions are gaining and how much of a win it is for them. Here's the New York Times front page today. Russian troops move in as U.S. troops exit Syrian region. The Russian Defense Ministry said that its military police were patrolling territory between Turkish and Syrian forces. And then right below that, Russia savors U.S. missteps in Syria and seizes opportunity. If we're going to talk about Russia savoring missteps in Syria, Russia completely outplayed the Obama administration on this issue and managed to save the Assad. There was a time when Assad really looked like he was going to be done. He was going to get Arab Springed, if you will. It was a very close-fought thing for a while, but then the Russians came in, the Iranians came in, they propped him up, they backed him up when it was absolutely critical for the Assad regime to stay in power. But now we're being told, oh, look at this bounty that has been left for the Russians because the Trump administration has moved some U.S. troops from this border region. Okay, well, now the Russians are going to be dealing with this. This is not some area of great strategic interest to the United States. This is not, oh no, they've seized these oil fields that will be funding their government forever. What will we do? We'd rather have these other players in charge of this territory. We don't want to be the ones that are policing this. We don't want to be the ones that are keeping these combatants from each other's necks. The Syrian government has moved into some of these areas, and I've been saying nobody wants to say this. Nobody wants to admit this out loud. Assad has won the Syrian civil war. His regime endured. He stayed. That was the plan all along. There is no plan, realistic plan, for him to be gone. There's no international pressure to speak of that has a prayer of having Assad step down or anything else. No. So the Assad regime is staying. So given that they're staying, would we rather have Assad trying to prevent the resurgence of ISIS, which is anti-Assad, is, the enemy of my enemy, my friends? You got to remember it. So now we got the Russians, we got the Syrians, the Assad regime rather, and the Turks all staring at each other across the battlefield. And we don't have U.S. troops that are right in the middle of this. And we're being told that this is a huge loss. No, what we want is these other players to take control of this area. Let the Russians try to figure out how to keep the Turks from fighting with the Kurds, from fighting with the Syrian national government. Is it going to be something that works out well for them? No, of course not. I mean, the Russians are brutal, and they've been bombing. They bombed civilians indiscriminately in the Aleppo campaign, and they've done all kinds of things in Syria that are horrific, but it's not our fight. Ultimately, and people say, oh, but there's going to be a resurgence of ISIS. Yeah, maybe. If there's a resurgence of ISIS, we'll have to deal with it. But there's never going to be some certification. There's no international bodies. There's no group that comes together and says, ISIS is finally gone. ISIS is a jihadist ideology in a region that has been riddled with extremism for as long as anybody can remember. You can argue stretching back for centuries, really over a millennium, if we're really going to talk about it. There's going to be extremism there in some form for the foreseeable. There's still Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula operating in Yemen. There's still Boko Haram in Nigeria. There's still the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines. You have these terrorist groups all over the world. Do we all say, oh, no, but we need to be there because, no, I mean, we maybe help the host government try to deal with it a little bit, but we're not leaving 1,000 troops everywhere where there happens to be the possibility of or an ongoing jihadist threat. We'd rather work through allies, partners, or even enemy states that just happen to share our interest in suppressing that terrorist entity. We should be honest about this stuff. I keep saying, what is the alternative? All these people are talking. We're going to leave U.S. troops in this part of Syria for the next decade. To what end? There's not going to be a political settlement. There's no negotiating with the Assad regime over this. This isn't critical territory for them. It's not like they can't function. Their government can't function. We're going to operate an independent Kurdish statelet, right on Turkey's border in Syria? We're going to be in charge of that? What was the game plan here? Oh, negotiate some kind of a political settlement. This is what people say when they have nothing else to say. There wasn't going to be any political settlement. So, look, I know I've got a somewhat alternative or contrarian point of view on this, but I also spent a lot of time in Iraq, a lot of time in Afghanistan, thinking about this, working on this stuff for the CIA. I know these arguments. I've seen what happens. No one's saying that Trump is the most eloquent in making the case, but he understands, get out. The mission is done. That's the lesson that we should have learned in Afghanistan and did not, and I'm hoping we've learned it now for Syria.
We are in the fight of our lives. Everything is on the table in 2020. They think so too, because they think if they lose in 2020, that they're going to have to, the rules are going to be fair and they're never going to win again. And they're right. If we win in 2020, they're done forever. But it's scary for us too, because if they win, literally, it could be the end of the world.
Literally, it could be the end of the world that the Republicans win. That's really all I have to tell you about the Democrat debate tonight. That's Tom Steyer. The fact that guy made $1 billion is stunning. Just goes to show you, you can be a total political nincompoop and make $1 billion. So there's that. There's plenty of those running around. The world might literally end. How is it possible? I can't exaggerate how much the libs and the left exaggerate in these political discussions, because they're saying things that, what? How do you go beyond the world will end? If your political party wins, the world will end. Is there anything more terrifying than that? Or is there a level, can you take the dial to 11? Is there anything that's bigger than the world will end? No, of course not. This is why when I say these people are shrill hysterics, I mean it. And that's really the Democrat slogan for tonight's debate. Vote Republican and the world will end. And you hate everything and you're terrible. Well, gee, that's really a helpful conversation, isn't it, libs?